on the Oriental garrison to Ben, 3 Reichs and you're out garrison. The most often used, however, is the simple Zyklon Ben, le mot juste. Which brings us back to Pepe the cartoon frog. As with most iconography, the backstory and context is quite complex. So when HillaryClinton.com flatly declares that Pepe's been almost entirely co-opted by white supremacists, this is simply false, and an attempt to impose meaning rather than to understand, an extremely common and decreasingly effective weapon of the evangelical left. Why engage in discourse when one can simply speak for one's opponent, dismiss their words as hate speech, and end the conversation before it's even begun? Before there were emojis, there were image replies. If, for example, a message board user wanted to respond to a funny post, he could simply post a picture of someone laughing as his reply. Over time, the images used to connote specific emotions became largely standardized. Tom Cruise laughing hysterically and Don Draper chuckling as he sips from a tumbler were both popular alternatives to writing LOL. There's no particular reason why Tom Cruise and Don Draper gained currency, let alone those two specific Tom Cruise and Don Draper images. It's as essentially random as football fans watching a giant battling an eagle who had competed with a Viking or a tiger a week earlier. As he explained on Time.com, illustrator Matt Fury created Pepe the Frog in 2006 as a character in his comic Boys Club. A panel of Pepe exclaiming, "Feels good, man," became a popular reaction to stories people shared, or even attached alongside posts where the author had a happy outcome. He was a troll's version of the smiley face, or the smiley face emoticon. And thanks to the principle of comedic inversion, it didn't take long until an image of a downcast Pepe, muttering "feels bad, man," gathered traction as well. As such, Pepe was part of a huge cast of image archetypes for close to a decade, and never had any political connotations whatsoever. But meanings change over time. LOL used to mean laughing out loud, but is now much closer to writing haha, in the same way that scuba is a word in itself and not literally regarded as an acronym for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. And because jargon serves as a signifier in internet culture just as much as it does in every other aspect of human existence, the mainstream term LOL became LEL, which begat kek, 1 letter higher, for long, complicated reasons. Trolls claim to do it for the lulz, but by 2015 they could be said to be doing it for the keks. Then, at some point in 2015, a random user discovered that there actually was an ancient Egyptian deity named Kek. If this weren't coincidence enough, there was an image of Kek next to a hieroglyph that resembled a man at a computer, as well as a double strand, as in DNA, and a frog. As such, the satirical cult of Kek was born. Kek was a chaos god who reveled in socio-political carnage, always with hilarious consequences, and Pepe was now regarded as his avatar. The claim became that meme magic is real, that internet posters could literally alter reality through their computers. For example, every post on the 4chan message boards is automatically assigned a sequential 9-digit code, since there have been over 100 million posts to date. If the last 2 digits happen to be identical, i.e. 102522433,
not quite dark yet.
This 1 in 10 result was called dubs, as in doubles, as well as trips for, say, ending in 555, quints for ending in 33333, etc. Since the code is only generated after any given message has been posted, 4chan began to be used by posters as a magic 8-ball. If this post gets dubs, Hillary will get a coughing fit in the next debate. Praise be to Kek. The tongue-in-cheek idea that memes were causing reality to warp was as rational an explanation as anything out there during the 2016 presidential campaign. Trump's use of humor and trolling was without any historical precedent, and not only was it unprecedented, it was actually making him win. The left has historically had a virtual monopoly in American humor. The use of humor to put over one's political views.
Thus, Pepe got canceled.
Can be traced back at the very least to the 1920s and the legendary Algonquin Round Table. For over a decade, a core group of now forgotten media heavyweights would gather daily for lunch at the Algonquin Hotel and engage in the search for the perfect retort. Like many, if not all such scenes, it's almost certainly the case that the prism of nostalgia has given their 10-year lunch a sublime glow that the reality didn't exactly match. Years later, the Algonquin table's most famous member, Dorothy Parker, said as much herself. The round table was just a lot of people telling jokes and telling each other how good they were. Just a bunch of loudmouths showing off, saving their gags for days, waiting for a chance to spring them. One of the roots of humor is the idea that it's funny because it's true. The evangelical left's culture implicitly turns this maxim on its head and gives the impression that things are true because they're funny, which is not quite the same thing. As a result, rather than their ideas being explicitly and logically argued for in the sense and in the snide, sarcastic sense, this cynical, it's just a joke facade is a convenient mask for an ideology that dare not expose itself completely. Behind closed doors, Parker made her real worldview plain, claiming that people don't know what they want until you give it to them.
Yes. Traffic
It's
backed
no
up the other
surprise
way.
that Parker was best friends with playwright Lillian Hellman, remembered as much for her writing as for her fondness for Stalin and her lifetime of dissembling. Every word she writes is a lie, including and the. And it should be no surprise either that, with typical leftist earnestness, Parker willed her estate to Martin Luther King, despite never having met him or even having any interaction with him whatsoever. After being discovered by the worst of the web, Ben Garrison ended up embracing his bad luck. He began to draw cartoons with new right ideas, earning him acclaim and acceptance. There are far fewer photoshops of his more recent work, and it's now become clear that Garrison is no hate monger. Fury has tried the opposite tack, and it looks unlikely to be an effective one. His belief that he had some form of effective ownership over Pepe the Frog was quickly put to the test in May 2017. Fury killed Pepe the Frog in a strip, and even drew the funeral in a frankly delusional attempt to strike the character from popular consciousness. It didn't even take hours for internet provocateurs to then appropriate Fury's other cartoon characters and make them even more explicit symbols of and advocates for literal Nazism. Landwalf's first name was declared to be Heinrich, for instance, and the squiggly lines in his sunglasses edited into a highly stylized SS logo. Pepe himself was depicted to be resurrected, a la the risen Christ. Just as with Campbell's and Warhol, Fury created Pepe, but someone else gave him meaning. Reclaiming him would be akin to Campbell's insisting, actually there could be no equivalent since the concept is absurd. It is literally impossible to remove the connotations and symbolism that an image has accumulated over time. New meanings may emerge, but past references will always be lingering in the background. Yet this desire to decree universal meaning is, again, a testament to the evangelical left's demand to maintain total control of discourse and even thought. Chapter 5. Airtight. When we win,
fuck, dude?
do not forget that these people want you broke,
Stupid bitch is doing 50.
dead, your kids raped and brainwashed, and they think it's funny. Samurai. I still remember being taken aback when I read an article in TV Guide in 1995
Stupid
where
Jesus
the author was
fish.
giddy that we would finally get to see a black Vulcan. The idea that humanoid races would evolve identically and independently on other worlds is insane even by sci-fi standards. But if we had white Vulcans, then surely there must be VOC, Vulcans of color, as well. As far back as 1997, Vibe magazine used typical progressive tactics to dismiss such an obvious criticism. Every once in a while, you get people who still can't accept a black Vulcan, the actor who played Tuvok pointed out. The author of the article reached the inevitable conclusion: white supremacist Trekkies? Emphasis in original. It's unclear which is more dim-witted. The idea that the only possible opposition for extraterrestrial diversity hires is white supremacy, or that white supremacists are somehow incapable of enjoying Star Trek. In other words, even imaginary worlds that literally don't exist must still be remade to fall in line with the edicts of evangelical progressivism. Not only is there nowhere on Earth to escape it,
Drunk.
but adherents to the creed insist upon controlling the worlds people go to escape the Earth. Whether sci-fi, fantasy, or some video games, it doesn't matter.
Who's drunk?
The video game subculture, as with other nerd subcultures like comic books and sci-fi television, has always been heavily male-dominated. That's not to say women aren't made to feel welcome. Most nerds would gladly give their 10-sided dice to be able to play an RPG with a girl. But such males are relatively low status, and associating with them, especially at a young age, is socially costly to females. That's the argument anyway. Let's take a role-playing video game like Super Mario Bros. Yes, I know it's not an RPG, I just wanted to give the gamers hearing this a momentary spike of rage. As Mario and Luigi make their way across the levels, they encounter an array of enemies whose only purpose is to keep the player from achieving his goals by destroying him. Each enemy has different properties and must be dealt with accordingly. The little mushroom Goombas can either be stomped on or shot with fireballs. The hard-shelled Buzzy Beetles are fireproof, but can be stomped on, while our heroes can use fire against the aptly named Spiny, but can't stomp on one for obvious reasons. When navigating such a game, therefore, players dedicate a large portion of time to figuring out how a given enemy operates and what tactics are the most effective at defeating it. To consider what a Goomba wants, or why it acts the way it does, is nonsensical.
Oh yeah, was it?
Or rather, the clear answer to why a Goomba is doing what it's doing is because it's been programmed to act that way.
I think it's just an old lady.
Reverse engineering its programming is therefore a useful technique to figuring out how to advance in the game. The story of Gamergate has been told ad infinitum. As briefly as possible, it started with Alex into Gamergate and allowed Milo Yiannopoulos make a name for himself. He consistently covered the story for Breitbart, reporting in September 2014, several prominent gaming journalists across America are part of the secret Game Journal Pros mailing list on which they discuss what to cover, what to ignore, and what approach their coverage should take to breaking news, Breitbart London can reveal. This revelation echoes the 2010 journalist scandal, in which liberal reporters were caught colluding and smearing their ideological opponents in a private mailing list set up by Ezra Klein, now the editor-in-chief of Vox.com. But unlike Journalist, which featured reporters who covered politics, the gaming community ostensibly had nothing to do with politics. Gaming is inherently an escape from serious issues. This was a crucial moment for many to realize how pervasive the evangelical left feels its reach needs to be.
Yeah.
I'd say about 60% of people in Gamergate were far left to left-leaning, explains Breitbart tech reporter Charlie Nash. It was gamers annoyed that reviewers were saying that something is a great game.
I gotta stop by one of the offices on the east side here and grab some pay cards. I'm all out in my office, so we're gonna make a pit stop on the way to my office.
Let's suppose someone had views that
We're listening to The New Right, if you guys don't know. Michael Malice is The New Right.
They would then plot to either ignore him, not get him a job, or get him out of the industry entirely. If you were a games journalist or developer, if you showed any support for Gamergate, your career usually didn't last long because they had all the context in the industry. In terms of gaming, the outcome was hardly victorious. They still have control, Nash said. Nothing's changed because they've purged everyone who disagreed with them. Since then, people have started their own review websites, but they're just blogs. In February 2018, Subnautica sound designer Simon Chylinski was publicly fired because of old tweets that weren't covered, such as his claim that importing random people from the third world is also importing third world tier crime rates and IQ, and telling author Richard Dawkins that all the former British colonies are now some of the best places in the world. Brits don't need to feel bad about this. You guys did well. But Gamergate was an important moment in proving the existence of the cathedral. The idea that what is being presented as fact is actually a carefully coordinated movement by elites to establish and impose their view of what reality is and how it should be. The Game Journal Pros list created the appearance that different outlets were independently coming to the same conclusions, even though it was quite coordinated. This is how the gamers came to see what conservatives are often loath to say. The evangelical left is an army of programmed enemies with whom discourse is quite literally pointless and whose only role is to destroy the heroes, or as leftists would say, protagonists, because hero is a problematic term. Yes, they are part of the game in the same way that the left is part of the country, the system, and the government, but their desire is to eradicate their opponents, not to coexist with them. They are the Goombas. In gaming, there's something called an exploit, an action that's against the spirit of the game, but technically doable and therefore acceptable in some sense. A quintessential exploit works as follows. Many games have stores within their worlds where the players can sell back unwanted items in exchange for money. These items will not become available for repurchase and will effectively cease to exist, since stores are programmed to only sell certain specific fixed inventory. That way, as the game advances, players can buy increasingly stronger weapons and armor, but can only do so at the appropriate points in the game, lest they get an unfair advantage early on. Many games also have quest items, unique items that are necessary to complete the game. For example, there might be a silver key without which the player can't access an important castle. Well, what happens if the player decides to sell that key? Selling a quest item to a store and then being unable to buy it back would effectively render the game dead. Within the context of the game, the key is permanently inaccessible and the player will never be able to pursue that castle. This type of scenario provides a problem for game programmers. Many get around this by making all quest items unsaleable. One simply can't sell them at the stores in the game at any price. Other games are programmed differently. As soon as the quest item is sold, it instantly reappears where it was first found, meaning there are now effectively infinite keys teleporting into existence. Whether this is an overlooked mistake in programming or a necessity based on how the game was written is somewhat irrelevant. It certainly doesn't make actual sense within the world of the game. So what some players do is obvious. Get the key, sell it, return to where it reappears, get it again, sell it again, repeat as needed. They are exploiting the programming of the game and earning their character unlimited funds in the process. One can see why some consider this cheating, even though the player isn't necessarily competing with another person, but only trying to finish the game. What this illustrates is how gamers think. Their hobby, not their job, but what they do for fun,
blew that light.
Figuring out the rules those worlds operate under, and then bending or even breaking those rules to get the result that they want. They also have an enormous amount of spare time and are quite prone to thinking logically and systematically when it comes to achieving their goals. This is who the evangelical left chose to fight with. Gamergate was probably the first time the evangelical left...
I think Great Lakes Audits has sat at this corner a few times just watching how often people run the red lights here, because it happens a lot. You gotta be super careful.
The goal was to clear the
at this intersection.
And to do that, one needed to understand the programming. In fact,
not that it's that big a deal, it's just, but the thing is there's a lot of accidents there. I used to live right off of this road here, one of these little white houses.
The weapon used against them usually needs to be. Bombs are needed to defeat the Triceratops like Dodongo in The Legend of Zelda, and the final enemy, Ganon, can be felled with the silver arrow and only the silver arrow. As these combinations are sometimes hard to figure out, it is the norm in gaming culture for such techniques to become widely disseminated. As such, a list of various types of leftists, their attacks, and their vulnerabilities was quickly drawn up and distributed online. By having such a
one of these little houses on the right here,
and having a movement populated by gamers who understand strategy, responses to progressives became uniform and independent without any sort of leader issuing orders. Further, there was constant
back in the single days
and feedback as to what worked and what didn't. The leftists were unable or unwilling to change their tactic of crying racism. The gamers, on the other hand, were trying every weapon until they found what worked, and they found the weapons that they needed. One type of foe that became identified was the false flag, a poorly disguised progressive who, say, suggests flooding an enemy's Twitter account in order to cause psychological stress. Knowing that the corporate press would be more than happy to exploit a toxic individual to paint an entire group with the same brush, the response to this type was obvious. Condemn, reply and clearly state that you do not agree with the shill, report on site. Whatever the technique, a counter-strategy was developed, and gamers and trolls had fun doing it. Reality competition shows like Project Runway and Top Chef thrive on television. Rather than casting exhibitionistic lunatics like other series, the shows are populated by talented people being forced to be creative under artificial constraints. Make a dress out of they find in the supermarket. Cook a monkfish dish that children would enjoy. The interest comes in watching the designers and chefs navigate their skills to meet these difficult, often arbitrary limitations. It's the same scenario when certain words are banned by a given social media platform. New, funny euphemisms are developed. Because they are clever and original, they spread and have even more power than that which they are meant to replace.
So basically, this chapter is the evolution of the meme.
Merely out of spite, starts to refer to African Americans as literally N-words or outdated farm equipment.
Oh, wow.
Is this less hurtful?
Wendy's is gone.
In September
the fuck?
2016, YouTube started a new campaign to more closely suppress racist hate speech on the site.
There?
On September 21st, a poll user asked, all it would take would be for internet assholes to use a common word in place
Ukraine,
of
yeah, it's Toledo's east side, which is pretty similar.
What the fuck are they going to do then? Thus, Operation Google was launched. It was a call to refer to blacks as Googles and Jews as Skypes in order to make banning the slurs technically impossible. The call to arms also included a photograph of a lynching labeled Google Hangout and a looting entitled Google Shopping. Of course, the progressive entertainment wing took aim at Gamergate as well. The popular teen drama Degrassi had the gamer kid bringing a gun to school. The same kids who had a years-long campaign against high school bullying.
All right, I'll be right back. I'll leave you guys on.
Announcing the nerds, the textbook bully targets voted most likely to be shoved into a locker as racist pre-murderers. What had changed? The nerds were no longer bowing down to progressive domination and were therefore fair game. Pun unavoidable. This comes as no surprise. The basis for many religions is the belief in the creed, or at the very least deference to its edicts. As members of the new right enjoy pointing out, the word Islam literally means submission. Far from merely defeating the enemy, Gamergate led to a discussion about how to keep the enemy from respawning, i.e. reappearing despite its ostensible defeat. How do progressives manage to get a foothold, and how can they be prevented from doing so? The alt-right blog socialmatter.net had a 2014 article that offered a blunt assessment of how entryism works and how and why it should be opposed. Female groups are of little civilizational import and are largely inconsequential, author Paul Tissot states flatly. On the other hand, because females are very interested in colonizing high-value male spaces, male groups are subverted and redirected to femme-centric goals/visions if women are present and not managed with an iron fist. According to this thinking, patriarchal culture, i.e. the only cultural value, operates like a cuckoo. Women glom on to male subcultures and reorient them to their own values, much like a cuckoo parasitically tricks other birds into raising her young at the expense of their own. How this occurs is via that one female who would join a group. Because she wants to join a predominantly or exclusively male-oriented scene, she's by definition not like other girls. But psychologically, she is exactly like every other female, and necessarily so. She thinks she's a roommate when she's actually a house guest. Soon, she'll be making demands, and a certain percentage of weak males will appease her, whether due to being conflict averse or trying to win her affections. Then it becomes a numbers game, and soon war, until domination. Entryism need not refer to men refusing to allow women in. It can be used in general to explain the need for some sort of, usually ideological, purity to maintain group cohesion. The term has roots that go back decades, but the new right has revived it as a weapon against conservatives and Republicans who thoroughly embrace inclusionism, diversity, and the big tent approach to elections and governing. As Gamergate proceeded, the counter-revolution grew. Online trolling has a strong overlap with video game culture, and the two formed quite a natural alliance. As such, any systemic attempt to ban hate speech or racism in an online context was analyzed in a similar way by gamers and trolls alike. The goal became, given the barriers in place, how can one still achieve an outcome that has been decreed as not only undesirable, but forbidden? This is why the term weaponized autism is such a frequent online joke. In his book, The Science of Evil, Simon Baron-Cohen discussed how autism and sociopathy are very closely related psychologically. An autistic person might tell someone that yes, that dress does make her look fat. He does this not to be hurtful, but because his literalism renders him incapable of understanding that the question is not to be taken at face value and is actually a demand for validation instead of a genuine inquiry. A sociopath might have the same verbatim response, but in his case, it would either stem from an indifference to causing harm or even from a desire to do so. Interestingly, people with autism are very much the subjects of sympathy, while sociopaths never are, despite both having inalterable, legitimate neurological conditions that neither has chosen. So regardless of whether some gamers and trolls are autistic or sociopaths or both, they showed no mercy and did not regard their foes as fully human. The goal became finding the workaround to an arbitrary edict and not worrying about the feelings of others. For many people, the question then became, why would anyone want to engage in hate speech or racist talk in the first place? The answers are varied. They could have a genuine desire to engage in discussion or dialogue about taboo issues without fear of censure. It could stem from a sense of power in upsetting others, especially one's enemies, or in subverting banality to humorous ends. It could be a simple, because I feel like it and don't have to explain myself to you. Even Lisa Simpson, literally a cartoon caricature of progressivism, couldn't help but sigh with longing upon hearing bully Jimbo Jones described as a good-looking rebel who plays by his own rules. Because the evangelical left, like most human beings, is highly lacking in empathy and unable to perceive other points of view, its members tend to equate their perspective with universally perceived truth. A reaction to a joke or a meme takes no thought whatsoever. It's visceral and it is immediate. Therefore, it follows that one's reaction must be true, and obviously so, since we know things are obvious when they are understandable. The fact that these immediate visceral reactions are a function of the
Alright, let's go to the shop.
And not akin to seeing and identifying, say, an apple on a table, is something most people would never even consider. As such, what is obviously hate speech or racism is
get there earlier today, that's for sure.
Not even hate speech at all. In the movie Ghost World, Enid's art teacher is forced to give her a failing grade for reappropriating past racist commercial iconography. While the painting is intended as a condemnation of racism and an analysis of the sort of imagery that was once taken for granted, but is now considered...
Clean up this area. This whole, on the left-hand side, is turning into one big park along the river there.
The revisionist attempts to strike the N-word from Mark Twain books, crucial historical proof of America's racist history, represent another example of progressive social domination taking precedence over context. Bristling at any sorts of restrictions on speech can therefore be seen as resentment at both being told what to say and it being classified as something one isn't. The evangelical left is very big on respecting someone's chosen identity in terms of issues such as gender and sexuality. Yet when it comes to being a racist or the phobe du jour, any progressive feels quite comfortable labeling another person as such. That's because being a racist is one's default spiritual condition. It is only via the saving grace of progressivism that a human being is able to escape that fallen state. Thus, the overwhelming focus of new right thinking and activism isn't about fighting a specific bill or arguing with the left issue by issue. Conservatives could and did make the fair and honest case that the way Obamacare was passed was legally obscene. The Democrats took an unrelated bill that had a majority, deleted the entire text, and inserted the text for Obamacare instead. Then, they passed the entirety through reconciliation, which does not require a filibuster-proof majority, but is explicitly meant to be used exclusively for budgetary issues, not legislation. The conservative criticism was true and accurate.
Shit. Sorry, guys.
Accurate and pointless. It had literally zero impact on stopping the bill's passage. But, as with the individual mandate, the conservative fixation with Obama himself was straight out of the Heritage Foundation. For new right adherents, the key is to identify leftist techniques and call them out when they are being used, and to make certain they are being stripped of their efficacy whenever possible. There will always be another Obama. One can argue all day long about whether Roe v. Wade is justified by the Constitution, but having 5 Supreme Court justices who say no would be far more important to pro-lifers than winning said argument. And since the new right is far more focused on culture than politics, the strategy...
This was before they overturned Roe. So this is
the mother of all new right
interesting that he was already looking into this.
Or variants thereof,
He knew exactly what they were doing.
Becoming red-pilled. The term
Not that I
directly
disagree.
from the documentary The Matrix. In the movie, everything that the vast majority of mankind sees is actually a lie, a false reality constructed for their benefit and comfort by a secret ruling cabal. Morpheus,
But the federal government should have no decision on that. It should be a state issue.
A choice of 2 pills. You take the blue pill, he explains, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. Take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. The film's concept is virtually identical to how red pilling is evoked in New Right and broader internet circles.
Yeah, he is a genius.
Namely, demonstrating to someone that what is presented as fact by the corporate press and entertainment industries is only, at best, a shadow of what is real. That this supposed reality is in fact a carefully constructed narrative intentionally designed to keep some very unpleasant people in power and to keep everyone else tame and submissive. Obviously, as in the film, the powers that be are desperate to ensure that such things never happen. As a result, any attempts at ratification, universal consensus understandably gives them comfort, but it can't really be said to give them truth. 100 people watching the same television show and agreeing with what that show presented have no independent claim to truth whatsoever. They are only taking what has been shown to them at face value. It is certainly possible that everything the corporate media puts forward as truth is in fact true. But there also exists the possibility that corporations naturally act out of self.
No, it's that bridge. That bridge has a lot of interference on it. If my Android Auto is on wireless and instead of plugged in like it is now, it disconnects on that bridge every time. Every time. We're still about 3 miles from the border. It'll happen again.
Constructs a story of its own. The revulsion can lead to an equally absurd world where literally everything is a lie, and everyone is consciously and actively in cahoots all the time. This leads to thinking that progressivism is a conscious and intentional scheme to destroy the West via whichever nefarious group one latches onto. The idea that the media is downright nefarious is not something that was part of political discourse until quite recently. What Mackinac Center Vice President Joseph Overton codified is the idea that, at any given time, there is only a certain range of discourse that is considered publicly acceptable. In the 1840s, slavery was widely defended and even lauded. The peculiar institution has no advocates today, and not only are there no advocates, but anyone who dared to advocate such a thing would suffer severe social, personal, and professional consequences. This respectable range is known as the Overton window. And Trump's moving of the Overton window was the biggest argument for a Trump presidency that had the broadest support across the entire new right. The left's exploitation of the Overton window is a major explanation for how progressivism increased its control over society despite ostensible conservative opposition. Imagine a scale from 1 to 10. The progressive wants to move it to 10. The conservative stands athwart history yelling stop. And compromise political cycle now starts to scale from 5 to 15, including things that would have been unthinkable last time. So the entire political discussion creeps ever closer to progressive fundamentalism. Trump, however, yanked the window very heavily to the right. Things that conservatives found unacceptable to even discuss, let alone advocate, he proclaimed loudly and proudly. This forced the left to move with him in terms of issues, if only to counter his rhetoric and shoot it down. A search for "I can't believe we're having this conversation" on Twitter or Facebook would yield so many results that it would take a supercomputer the size of Trump Tower to tally them all. One interesting side question is whether Trump has actually moved the Overton window, or if, in my view, he is simply creating a second window parallel to progressive discourse. There are many indicators that Americans are literally beginning to speak, if not different languages, at least different dialects when it comes to
15
politics
years,
and
wow.
culture. Terms such as illegal alien versus undocumented immigrant, tax increases versus revenue generation, or even simply what pronoun to use when discussing transgender people, are all demonstrations of the fact that both political sides are attempting to control thought by controlling language, as well as using language to demonstrate one's political allegiances. Here, conservatives miss the mark. They do understand that, for progressives, language is not merely used to communicate ideas, but to control, among other purposes. As such, conservatives have argued about political correctness for years, but in this they are hypocritical. The idea that political correctness is a uniquely left-wing phenomenon is simply untrue. There is a left-wing iteration of conversational policing, but this is in no sense unique to the left. There are many subjects to which people who are right of center react with the same umbrage that a liberal would in a parallel situation. Speaking with a conservative about the police or the military is exactly like speaking with a progressive about people of color. The immediate instinct is to defend the group from any criticism. A calm, reasonable discussion of the subject is the aberration rather than the norm. Speaking of black crime is racist. Speaking of American war crimes is also racist, in the sense that racist simply means that which I'm against. In 1981, for example, the first season of Dynasty had Jeff Colby cracking jokes with elder patriarch Blake Carrington about smoking marijuana as they dined in their opulent mansion. Hardly two archetypical hippies. Not long after that came Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign, and the idea that illegal drug use of any kind could be shown in a positive or even neutral light on television fell by the wayside. Most conservatives are also averse to calm discussions of children and sexuality. And for some sects of conservatism, the idea of the Constitution is fetishized far more than the actual document should be. Such types do not react well to being reminded that the best part of the Constitution, namely the Bill of Rights, were edits to the original document. My personal favorite is trolling conservatives with the indisputable fact that more voters wanted Hillary Clinton to be president than Donald Trump. Despite themselves, they then launch into their best, "What difference does it make?" Benghazi hearing impression. It's hysterical, in both senses of the term. For progressives especially, language is used as in-group signaling, a cue that one is on the correct team. Many have made the observation that the term African American is grossly imprecise. The phrase is now frequently used to describe Caribbean Americans, as well as non-American Africans. In practice, African American is simply a euphemistic way of saying black. In other words, African American is literally wrong, but functionally appropriate, because the function of a euphemism is to reference something without actually saying it. Most Americans don't know that referring to Eskimos is forbidden north of the border, with the preferred term being Inuit. Much as with African Americans, however, there are people formerly known as Eskimos whose tribes aren't Inuit. Yet the term is in use because it serves its purpose. It demonstrates that the speakers took the program. The terms are used to identify the speaker as much as the subject. Like the password to some underground club, the right cue is more important than the literal accuracy.
Got off just in time there. Woo, that was close.
The doorman waves patrons in regardless of whether or not the crow actually flies at midnight. We are social animals, and as such, the vast majority of human beings prefer to be part of the in-group, which for many, especially in urban areas, means the progressive milieu.
Oh shit, that is backed up long.
The right positioning helps a person with everything from getting a job to getting laid. As a consequence of this psychology, progressives are left with a problem. It costs nothing for someone to adopt the correct term in their speech, so as a proper term becomes popularized and pervasive, it inevitably loses its function of distinguishing good people from the bad due to those who are simply trying to pass as good. The progressive solution to this problem is to constantly change language in order to maintain some semblance of verbal social cues. Black became colored, became Negro, became Afro-American, became African-American. There are a few things that progressives like more than presenting the appearance of being on the cutting edge of social thought. What, you don't subscribe to the New Yorker? You really should be reading it. Conversely, someone using the wrong term is obviously using outdated speech and therefore can be dismissed as having outdated thoughts. Alongside in-group signaling is virtue signaling, an extremely common, if not universal, aspect of evangelical progressive culture. Since the progressive religion is based on salvation through faith and not via works, there are no positive achievements to demonstrate one's salvation, either to others or even to oneself. Progressives are thereby forced to do something without actually doing anything. We've seen this in Hollywood during the AIDS crisis, where a red ribbon was worn both by those actively fundraising to fight the disease and those who simply wanted to stick something on their lapel to show that they were one of the good guys. Unlike the deadly disease, those ribbons came and went fairly quickly. More recently, virtue signaling was seen with the meme of people posting photos of themselves holding up a sign that read, "Bring back our girls," after almost 300 female students were kidnapped by Boko Haram in Nigeria. The nadir of this was when First Lady Michelle Obama got in on the action, dour look and all. So serious. Boko Haram is an Arabic-speaking organization, and it's doubtful that Mrs. Obama's forlorn expression would have caused the rebels to feel pity, as opposed to glee, for causing their enemies such distress. But this picture was done as a signal to Mrs. Obama's group, not as an actual message to the kidnappers. Now, thanks to Facebook, anyone can easily put a filter over their profile photo the next time a radical Islamist commits mass murder in some country that we ostensibly care about. Note that the tagline was "Je suis Charlie" after the Charlie Hebdo killings, and not "Nous sommes Charlie." I am Charlie, not we are Charlie, because this is a social proclamation of one's claim to goodness. Yet these cases are somewhat mitigated. Both are examples where most people, correctly, felt helpless about effecting change regarding a tragedy, and yet still desperately wanted to, appear to, do something about the events. The purest of virtue signaling can be seen in the likes of what was found on actor James Franco's now deleted Instagram page. Franco's brief bio included the caveat, "If you're racist, sexist, or homophobic, get the F out of here." It takes courage to stand up to racists, but writing out the F word is a bridge too far, apparently. The idea that Franco's disclaimer would give anyone pause is absurd, not to mention the fact that very many racists, sexists, and homophobes would be the first to deny that they're those things, and possibly even delude themselves accordingly. The actual purpose, then, was for Franco to signal to his tribe that he's a good moral person fighting against heresies. One ancillary to virtue signaling is white knighting, a largely online phenomenon wherein a male rushes to the defense of a female he doesn't even know in hopes of proving what a great person he is. This often results in him getting rebuked and being told that, "She's not gonna fuck you, bro." The opposite of this behavior is black knighting, where males attack females out of proportion in ham-fisted attempts to demonstrate their supposed masculinity. One of the major recruiting aspects of new right culture is its ability to identify and weaponize such psychological effects, especially against ostensibly educated people who are convinced that racists are all mouth-breeding inbreds. By far, the most central prison through which their foes are analyzed by the new right is the intellectual phenomenon.
She's just sitting there. Now she got cars stacking up behind her.
Psychologists Dunning and Kruger gave students exams and then graded them. Then they asked the students how they thought they had.
So everybody who got off the freeways now on this road.
What they found was that those who did the poorest.
This is called Dixie Highway.
When it came to judging their performance relative to others. As one acquaintance,
actually a pretty old road.
Stupid people
runs parallel to Telegraph Road.
Given that college graduates and those with higher degrees thereby have proof that they are bright, and to equate bright with brilliant is not psychologically difficult to do, we are left with an entire population of people who aren't exceptionally smart but are certain that they are. One university study had over 90% of faculty regard themselves as above average.
She's right behind me now.
This was not in comparison to the average person, but to their colleagues.
I think she's just lost and she's trying to find a route.
The vast majority of academics think they are better than average at their job.
She had cars stacking up behind her and they weren't having it.
Not perhaps to these self-assessed brainiacs. This manifests as a phenomenon that alt-right writer Vox Day refers to as midwits. It is true that poor spelling correlates with lower intelligence and lower education levels especially. But the inverse
Runaway train, huh?
Having good spelling does not make one particularly bright.
No conductor?
Between
or the conductor?
Y-O-U-R,
I thought that the conductor had to have his foot on the pedal all the time, and if his foot came off the pedal, it would stop the train. Unless he passed out on the pedal.
As Dave puts it,
I guess every trains are,
those who possess
some train
above
systems
average
are different, but
intelligence and trouble to occasionally read newspapers and magazines.
I guess
tend to
if you
genuinely
passed
be
out
under the erroneous
and landed
impression
on the pedal.
that they possess superlative intelligence. The mid-witted individual tends to compare himself to those below average.
Or is it a drone train?
Because he isn't like them.
There we go. Interrupting me. Impact employment.
Hello, Norm. How are you doing this lovely day?
How can I help you?
I just left your office down here on Front Street.
Okay.
You said you weren't going to be available until 1. But I am already on the file. My name is Eugene Jones. I worked for you like 2 years ago at the Telegraph and the Front place, and I had lost my sister, and I let the pressures get to me, and and I was wondering if I can get employment.
I'll have to check your file to make sure, and then usually they have to just give the okay. As long as it was just, did you just stop showing up, or were you terminated?
Yes, I think I was terminated.
I
asked them to terminate.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, my sister passed away, and we had an argument about a cell phone, and I was trying to explain to them that, my dad just passed away, my mom needed to contact me.
Yeah, well, if there was some kind of, a lot of times if there's some kind of conflict or something like that, it may be a problem, but either way, I'll ask. I mean, they do need folks on first shift for sure.
Okay, you said first shift?
Yeah.
It don't matter. I prefer the night shift because of my children, but
Yeah,
hey,
no, I get it, and when things open up on second, I'm sure you can get bumped.
Okay.
But right now the need's on first.
Don't forget me, Eugene Jones. They don't remember me anyway. I'm a hard worker. Alex is the one that told me to come talk to you about it.
Okay. All right. I'll actually be up there about noon, but I got a few people coming in at 1. Can you come back at like 2 or 3?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out that now. I'm trying to stall some time. I ain't really got no money, so
I get it.
I leave. Yeah, so I'm trying to go down here to 35 Front and fill out an application just to stall some time.
Okay. Well, like I said, come back by after 1.
I will.
And I mean, it may take a minute to get through, but since you've already worked there, we'll just have to update some stuff. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I do need to shoot. Alex, you said Alex told you to call. Who's Alex?
Alex is he's I don't know his last name.
He works at
the plant on Telegraph.
Okay. All right. He's not one that I normally communicate with. Then.
No. He got hired in.
Well,
some of his Mexican friends.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, come back. The best time I mean, I know you don't want to try and kill too much time, but if you want to just be back there at 1 o'clock, I already have supposed to have 2 people there, but if not, either way, I can usually do 3 at a time. It's not that big a deal.
I know how you work, Norm. I already know the routine. We did this twice.
Okay.
I didn't work twice with you. I know you won't play no game.
All right. Well, I'm not.
We're gonna make this money.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the goal. The goal's for everybody to make some money.
Yes, sir.
I don't make money unless you're making money.
I already know your speeches, baby. We've worked together plenty of times. Norm, you're a good person. I wouldn't even come back to work for you if I ain't know that you was a stickler for the rule.
All right. So, come back up there at 1 o'clock. And do you have ID and stuff?
Yes, I have my current ID, and I'm pretty sure I got my social security number in my book bag.
All right. We'll see you at 1 o'clock, man.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.
How the fuck you get myself wrong?
He must be a genius. It is the difference between the relative and the absolute. The tallest person in a given group might not, in fact, actually be tall if the group consisted entirely of short people. Similarly, genuinely intelligent people tend to focus far more on the other party's ideas when it comes to discussions, rather than looking for signifiers of intellect, verbal cues, or relative levels of social credibility. Having a Harvard or Yale degree does not even imply that one is smarter than everyone who graduated from every inferior school, not to mention those who didn't attend college at all. Further, being smarter than another person doesn't imply that one will outthink them on every issue, especially given different bases of knowledge, expertise, and experience.
The rumble
One can
strips are in the
easily
middle of the
imagine
road
Barack
here.
Obama being smarter than everyone in his cabinet.
I had one of these
Yet
back
it's
there that was half
absurd to
hanging into the
posit
road.
that
I had to
he
go
knew
into
more
the
than
middle.
every one of them when it came to their own departments.
They get a lot of head-on collisions when it gets foggy around here, so they have these rumble strips in the middle.
In addition to delusions, there are intellectually dishonest techniques such as Mott and Bailey. As explained on the Slate Star Codex blog, Mott and Bailey is an intellectual form of bait and switch. As the blogger explains it, there's a tower, the Mott, surrounded by a field, the Bailey. The field is used for production of food, the tower for defense. In discussion, the concept refers to the tendency of people to make a spurious claim, retreat to the tower of indisputable truth when challenged, and then return back to making the claim as if it had been proven. As in, claim, all white people are the inherent beneficiaries of racism. Challenge, what about poor whites living, say, in Appalachia? Claim, are you really saying that racism hasn't historically and to this day been a strong force in our culture? Challenge, of course not. Claim, right, all white people are the inherent beneficiaries of racism. This toggling is by no means unique to progressives or even people on the left. The alt-right version is to recognize that the number of Jewish people in media is out of proportion to our percentage of the population. Therefore, they claim we have sinister, nefarious aims. When challenged on the latter, as if progressive wasps in the media don't have the same precise biases and worldview, they respond by reiterating the numbers of Jews, a numerical data point that was never in contention to begin with. Given all this, rather than fighting the left, many members of the New Right argue for what they call agree, amplify, and accelerate. In other words, since evangelical progressivism is in defiance of reality, hastening its collapse by encouraging its purest strains is arguably easier, and certainly more fun, than actually fighting it. Another strategy that is anathema to most conservatives. The agree, amplify, and accelerate strategy has started creeping into mainstream right-wing ideology, the smarter adherents of which can't help but notice that the New Right is more effective at many things than they have been. Hence Kurt Schlichter's May 2017 townhall.com article, it's a toned-down version of the AAA approach, and the necessary insistence that alt-right weirdos don't count. Bless your heart, Kurt. Schlichter recognizes the appeal of the strategy on some level. These concepts are widely discussed in online forums and on social media, yet there is no real text that codifies New Right analysis for several reasons. First, there really isn't anyone in a position to write it. Second, the material would be considered quite niche. Yes, there aren't that many members of the New Right, but there are just over 500 members of Congress, and they carry enormous influence. It's not a numbers game in terms of political warfare, but it certainly is in terms of publishing. Finally, the tactics and analyses are dynamic responses to ever-changing real-time operations, both from and against the left. That's simply the nature of warfare. The closest thing to a manual for fighting the evangelical left comes from alt-right sci-fi author Vox Day. Years ago, Day used to be colleagues of Ben Shapiro at the heretical right-wing website WND. Day wrote, "We corresponded a few times and were on friendly, if distant terms. I mean, what do you talk about with a little kid whose idea of a good time is launching obvious rhetorical attacks at liberals?" As he matured, he gradually began to question the ideas he was parroting and reached the point where he considered quitting the media game. I'll have to dig out the emails to figure out exactly what I told him, but if I recall correctly, I encouraged him to resist the temptation to become a media whore. I understood the allure, as it was a poisoned apple that was also offered to me, but perhaps it was easier for me to turn it down since I was living in Europe and already established in the game development world. Ben, unfortunately, couldn't resist the apple or the easy way forward, writing whatever his backers told him to write. I haven't read him much since he wrote those dreadful chicken shit columns in 2005, i.e. Shapiro's two Why Chicken Hawk Argument is Un-American pieces, so I don't know how much of what he writes he genuinely believes now, and how much he is still parroting. Of course, the human mind being the incredible rationalizing machine that it is, it's entirely possible that he has come to believe what he's been told to say. As is often the case with the New Right, Day's contempt is as great for the conservative Shapiro as it is for the left. In 2016, Day wrote that Shapiro is not pro-American, he's not a nationalist, He's just another nominal Jewish conservative who is a professional member of the mainstream media's Potemkin opposition and more devoted to fighting racism than big government. Day's 2015 book, SJWs Always Lie, is presented as a how-to guide to deal with the members of the evangelical left, specifically referring to their social justice warriors, or SJWs. Here, he presents the new right worldview in concise, pithy form. The important thing is to grasp the fact that you are never safe in the vicinity of SJWs. Attempting to mollify, appease, or otherwise accommodate the SJWs around you will not put you at any less risk, but tends to make you more vulnerable to their attacks in the long run. This is true even if you are sympathetic to some of the ideas that SJWs claim are their goals, such as equality, diversity, respect, feminism, income equality, fat acceptance, gay marriage, transgender acceptance, vegetarianism, religious ecumenicism, and atheism. In fact, this is particularly true if you are sympathetic to any of their objectives, as you are more easily pressured and policed. This is not a subculture that looks fondly upon the days when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill shook hands and came to a bipartisan consensus. For Gay and others on the new right, the progressives are the enemy, unsalvageable, evil, and inherently damaged. In contrast to Shapiro's How to Debate Leftists and Destroy Them, 11 Rules for Winning the Argument, Day is not interested in debate. The most important thing to accept here, Day says, is the complete impossibility of compromise or even meaningful communication with your attackers. SJWs do not engage in rational debate because they are not rational, and they do not engage in honest discourse because they do not believe in objective truth. A large percentage of SJWs are prone to various forms of mental illness. Being competitive with regards to their victimhood, it is not at all uncommon for them to openly brag about being on various antidepressants and other psychiatric medications. Day's solution comes in several steps, including building alternative institutions, rejecting their ideals, defunding and destroying their propaganda centers, and explicitly denying them employment. In many ways, this precisely mirrors the progressive view of how the new right should be treated, as evil hate mongers who should not be given a platform to express.
All right, we're gonna get set it up. It's obviously gonna be busy today, so I think I'm gonna play, because Crowder, I think is already done. I'm gonna play Crowder, and then I'll probably play some Russell Brand once I get the desktop set up. If it works well. Been having issues with that laptop, so we'll see. See y'all in a bit.